Music. No matter your Christian tradition, it's part of the worship experience. But is it a safe part? Do the words we sing match the theology being preached? Is tradition more valued than affirmation? Join me, Siobhan Boyd-Nelson, and my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Ben Huelskamp, for How Sweet the Sound, where we take a closer look at the hymns, worship anthems, and gospel favorites we sing and how they create or dismantle safer spaces for LGBTQIA+ people of faith. Oh my gosh, Ben, it's you.
It is, and it's you, Siobhan. How are you?
I am doing wonderfully. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear. I have a question for you today for our final episode of this little mini series. And that
Okay.
question is, how do you feel about Sister Act and Sister Act 2?
Ooh, great movies.
Okay.
Overall, love them. Great music. Sort of good premise. I mean, the Catholic boy in me, would critique certain things uh, about their portrayal of Catholic nuns and Catholic priests, but other than that, I love it. I love the I don't know. I love the message of it. I love the music. Great comedy, some great one-liners, and I think I don't know who created it or who wrote it, but clearly there were some Catholic folks involved because it's one of those movies that correctly critiques or correctly makes jokes about the Catholic Church in ways that I feel like at least Catholics are going to be like, oh yeah, that's 100% true.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, Ben, meaning I wanted to know what that portrayal of Catholic school and the nuns, how that stacked up against your actual experience as a Catholic school boy.
Yep. I mean, it stacks up very well, and uh, the priests and the nuns that I knew and that I grew up around were pretty much, on the same level. They talked a hard, they talked like hard asses, but they were, pretty even keeled overall, and even to the
Yes.
point of being quite funny.
Yes. Okay. Okay. That sounds a little bit magical, but I will definitely say that Sister Act made Catholic school made going to Catholic school look like fun, and probably made it look like more fun than it actually was. Um, Now, this was 1993. I'll tell you, I was about 13 years old that year when Sister Act came out, and then Sister Act 2 came out a few years later. As a Zennial, this was such a big deal, Ben. And as like a preteen, teenage Black church girl, this made church music, I don't want to say cool, but it very much modernized a lot of like the church standards that we grew up with, right? Those hymns
Yep.
and those gospel numbers. So Sister Act 2 is one of those. And of course, the song we're going to be talking about today with Lauryn Hill, it just really is cemented kind of in my memories of growing up when that soundtrack, everything. And I think we all wanted to imagine ourselves as, amazing singers who could just break out in song with their friends around a piano in a beautiful Catholic school surrounded by loving nuns. Oh,
Sure.
to,
And
to have
I think
lived
Sister
that
Act.
life.
Sorry.
I said to have lived that life.
Well, and I also think that Sister Act did it well. I mean, it was
Yeah.
yes, it was a comedy. It wasn't meant to be all that close to how Catholic school life may or may not have been, but it did very. It was not Glee. It wasn't a musical per se.
Right.
They weren't just
Right.
breaking out into song randomly. The singing was contained to moments where singing, for the most part, should happen. Church,
Yes.
school, hanging out with friends. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to randomly break into a musical number now. And I think particularly Sister Act 2 did a really good job of portraying the students who were there. Because Catholic school life, like anything else, looks very different in, a more urban setting than it would in my very rural background.
Very
Um,
true.
and by and large, both movies very accurately portrayed the relative lack of diversity among Catholic nuns and Catholic priests and brothers. They're almost all
Yes.
white, except for
Yes.
Whoopi Goldberg's character.
Right. No matter where they're serving, whether they're in that
Yes,
urban environment or that more rural environment. Very good point.
correct.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't let this series end without doing a song from Sister Act 2. That's just the Xennial in me, who was really kind of chomping at the bit to figure out which one we should do. And we landed on His Eye is on the Sparrow, which, while I guess brought to the modern ear there in the 90s, was 85 years old, more than 85 years old at the time of Sister Act 2. So His Eye on the Sparrow His Eye is on the Sparrow was written by Civilla Durfee Holden Martin, who was born in 1866 and passed away in 1948. And the composer of the music was Charles H. Gabriel, who was born in 1856 and passed away in 1932. The song itself was written in 1905. So a little bit about Civilla. She was a preacher's wife, born originally in Nova Scotia, Canada, like I said, in 1866. She may have been married twice. So that Holden was a previous possible husband, but there's not a lot known about that. But at some point, she was a school teacher and she met Walter Martin, who was a Baptist minister. And they ended up getting married. They had a shared love of music, it is said, and they connected over that, and they ended up getting married. And once they were married, Civilla and Martin would travel around. They were evangelists. Well, Martin would travel around. Civilla, unfortunately, was had frail health, and so she would travel with him when she could, but often she had to stay home because of her health. But she was a prolific writer. I mean, just absolutely prolific. Her first hymn was God Will Take Care of You in 1904, which is also very popular. But over her lifetime, she is credited with over 600, the text of 600 different hymns, which is absolutely amazing. Often, Martin was, her husband, Walter Martin, was the person who composed the music for her hymns, but she did work with other people, such as Charles H. Gabriel, which is who she was with, who she worked with for the music on His Eye is on the Sparrow. So Charles Gabriel, also incredibly prolific. He was born in Iowa on a farm in 1856. He had no formal educational music education. Nothing. He taught himself to play the organ. And then by the age of 17, he was teaching music in traveling music schools. So he was, just really, really took to music from a very young age. Over his life, he is said to have written or composed 7,000 to 8,000 songs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Just started early and just kept going. There's some folklore in the little town that he's from in Iowa that says that, like, on a Monday, the pastor of the parish church saw Charles and said, "Hey, I'm doing a sermon on Sunday, and here's the topic." And then by Sunday, Charles had the song ready for him, which is so reminiscent of so many of the other songs that we've talked about that were written by preachers for their own sermons, right? So it would be interesting if that were actually true or had some grain of truth there as a way of him getting started with the songwriting. So he did write an autobiography, and it's called 60 Years of Gospel Song, which is, I think that's what his life was about. You don't write 8,000 songs and do much more, I don't think. And then he was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame in 1982. And when you write 8,000 songs, I think that's probably pretty warranted. Yeah, you got to give it to the guy.
Yep.
He worked with Civilla at least 3 times that I could find. So not just this song, but at least two others. I wasn't able to find how they knew each other. But Civilla lived in, I think, Elmira, New York, and traveled through the Northeast, but eventually spent the last, I would say, 25 to 30 years of her life in Atlanta, Georgia. Charles was born in Iowa, eventually made it to Chicago, where he worked for a music publisher and got into music publishing. So a little bit different from our other backstories. I think this is our only female lyricist or composer that we've encountered. So that's a fun thing, I think, to have a feminine perspective in the song. And I'm wondering what that does to the lyrics.
Totally.
So the song itself, there is actually a story that Civilla would tell about the writing of the song. So it was the spring of 1905. They were in Elmira, New York, and they knew another couple, Mr. and Mrs. Doolittle, and they call them true saints of God, is how she describes them. Now, Mrs. Doolittle was bedridden, and Mr. Doolittle had an incurable illness and used a wheelchair. So two people who had a lot of physical ailments in front of them. And you can imagine in 1905, what that might have been like, because that was before a lot of the things that we have now to work with folks who have physical impairments. And she says, despite their afflictions, they lived happy Christian lives, bringing inspiration and comfort to all who knew them. One day, while we were visiting with the Doolittles, my husband commented on their bright hopefulness and asked them for the secret of it. Mrs. Doolittle's reply was simple. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. The beauty of this simple expression of boundless faith gripped the hearts and fired the imagination of Dr. Martin and me. The hymn, His Eye is on the Sparrow, was the outcome of that experience. So really a beautiful, I think, inspiration for a song. And I would say I actually had someone in my life that I would say was like the Doolittles. So my mom's best friend, who, I would call my aunt, because literally she was there before I was born, and I always knew her. She was afflicted with rheumatoid arthritis in her mid 30s to early 40s. And she had a particularly aggressive form of the disease. And even though she essentially became disabled because of the disease, she started a business decorating cakes. Now, if you know anything about RA, it affects your joints, and it affected the joints of her feet and her hands, made it very hard for her to grip things. But she started a business where she had to stand or sit and use pipettes to decorate cakes. And the joy and I remember when talking to her about life and about how she was dealing with her illness and the fact that, she had this crippling disease in her 40s and 50s when she was still a very young woman. And she would look at me and say, well, how can I not be joyful? I'm still alive. She said, I go to the doctor and see people way worse off than me, but there is no way that I'm going to be upset. And it's one of those things that I have thought about, for the last 20, 30 years, of her unflinching joy no matter what was going on. It was like, oh, no. I can find joy in this life no matter what. And she was incredibly and continues to be incredibly inspirational to me. So I kind of get it. I really align with this.
That's awesome.
So like we talked about at the beginning, this song was featured in Sister Act 2 from 1993. It was sung by Lauryn Hill and Tanya Blount, who now performs under the name of Tanya Trotter. And so it was, a huge song. Everybody knows that scene. Everybody was singing that. I'm going to tell you that right now, all the Black girls were singing that at recess and at church. We all wanted to do those runs, those beautiful runs. And then Bishop Michael Curry, who you might recognize as the first African-American presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. he wrote a book in 2020, and in that book, he noted that that Lauryn Hill, Tanya Blount performance really brought the song to a modern audience and kind of reinvigorated it. And I know it really brought it to me as part of that audience. And then if you, many people who are my age or around my age, many performing artists that you would know, have noted that the song inspired them to become musical artists, including Jennifer Hudson, Kelly Clarkson, and Katy Perry, who many don't know started off as a Christian artist. So before she was kissing girls, she was singing to Jesus.
Not that you can't kiss girls and sing to and about Jesus.
Oh my gosh, you can and you should, in fact, is what I'm going to say. But Katie made it kind of an either or there. But yeah, so that is the background of His Eyes on the Sparrow.
Thank you so much.
Anything stand out to you?
I think just how prolific both Civilla Martin and Charles Gabriel were in their writing. I mean, 600 plus hymn texts is quite an achievement. 7,000 to 8,000 songs and or the music for songs is. I mean, I can't fathom that. I can't even fathom that in the age of being able to score music digitally or even plug things into AI. I mean, but he was working at a time when he was probably doing all of this by hand. No, he was certainly doing all of this by hand.
Right.
I can't imagine just being able to come up with that and being able to, I don't know. It just absolutely floors me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact that he was self-taught, and I mean, really, you'd almost have to think that he really had a gift for music, and amazing that he shared it with us.
Definitely.
All right, so let's get into the song itself. The song has a lot of biblical basis, even though it came from Mrs. Doolittle's, what Mrs. Doolittle said. What Mrs. Doolittle said was grounded in scripture, right? So there are 3 scriptures which I'm going to share as being the basis for the lyrics. The first one is Psalm 32:8. It says, "I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye." Then we have Matthew 6:26, which says, "Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valued than they?" And then finally, Matthew 10:29 through 31. "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore. Ye are of more value than many sparrows."
So awesome. For the lyric, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, awesome that I like those, especially the Matthew 10:29 through 31. That's one of those that comes to mind. Those are one of those ones that is always coming to mind because I think it's one of those comforting passages for me personally.
Totally. So, for the lyrics, why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is he. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Let not your heart be troubled. His tender word I hear, and resting on his goodness, I lose my doubt and fear. Though by the path he leadeth, but one step I may see. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds rise, when songs give place to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From care he sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me.
Now, Ben, folks might have been surprised that there was more than one verse to this song.
I definitely was.
Often, okay. Often only the first verse is sung, and I think because the notes, you hold the notes for so long, and then particularly if you're in a Black church, you're going to have a lot of runs in this song. The Mahalia Jackson version that I listened to this morning was 3.5 to 4 minutes, and that was just the first verse and chorus. So you can imagine doing all three verses the way this song is typically sung is going to be at least a 10-minute song.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But let's break it down. Let's get into it. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder how the original, when it was written by Gabriel Martin, I wonder how they intended it to be.
Yes.
Given the denominations that at least Martin's in, given their backgrounds, I mean, I guess I can see this moving a little bit more like sort of like the other Victorian hymns we've looked at. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that for sure, because they were also composing from a gospel music perspective.
Yes.
Even though this hymn definitely has that poetry, that rhythm that we've seen in some of the other hymns from around the same time. For example, Onward Christian Soldiers, Amazing Grace, etc.
Right. Everything that I read describes it as a gospel song, though it does have hymn-like tendencies. I think because there is repetition, but there isn't quite as much repetition as there would be in a gospel song. And I think that there's more here lyrically than there often is in a gospel song, particularly when you get to the fact that there are actually 3 verses.
Sure.
All right, so breaking down the first verse. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? So I think the first thing I know is that this is definitely from a first person perspective. And it starts with questions. And it's questioning yourself almost. Like this is a conversation that you are having with yourself.
Yeah. It's definitely self-referential. It's definitely reflective.
Mm-hmm. I like the use of the word discouraged. I think that's such a good word to define the feeling that we often have of we're trying, and then something happens and it like sets us back, right? It's like that 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or even 4 steps back. That leads to feeling discouraged. And then that the shadows, here I don't hear shadows as strongly as I would hear perhaps the word enemy or darkness. And I don't know what it is about the phrasing or maybe the song overall, but shadows I feel are just times when the sun isn't shining, when there's a dark cloud overhead. There's something really bothering you or something that you're working through, but it's not in any way permanent. It's not necessarily malevolent.
See, I find the use of shadows here very interesting. Again, given when the hymn was written,
Mm-hmm.
If we assume that this is all self-referential, this is all reflective. I mean, discouraged is definitely an emotion that we all have had at some point in our lives. But
right.
In the 21st century, at least when I hear shadows and we talk about an individual, I hear depression. I hear maybe anxiety,
Mm,
which is,
mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily sure how shadows would have been used around. I think this was 1905. Would have
Right.
been used in that period, which to me makes it really interesting because it's almost saying, instead of like the shadows are descending upon me, the sun has gone behind a cloud sort of thing. This is more saying like when the shadows went more interior to me. So when
Mm-hmm.
so I almost read it again in a similar way to our more 21st century way of saying, when, why should depression come to me? Why should anxiety come to me?
Yeah.
Not necessarily in a clinical sense, but to go along with the feeling of being discouraged, and then in the next line of
Yes.
being lonely.
Yes. I absolutely hear. I hear exactly what you're saying. And that, yes, why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? And I think your point about depression, there's something to be said here about how we would read this in the 21st century.
Yeah,
If I'm thinking of someone who is discouraged, is living in shadows, is lonely, and is longing for heaven, I'm thinking of someone who is not doing well mentally and might be having some suicidal ideation even. And even though I've never sat and with these lyrics and go, oh my gosh, are they talking about, suicidal ideation here? I think perhaps this might have been part of why I was so drawn to the song, because of that history and that experience
sure,
when
sure.
this was brought my to my knowledge.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that longing, yeah, that longing for heaven and home. And it also, I think, speaks to, and I've said this to you before, Ben, Christians who are so focused on heaven that they don't pay attention to earth,
yep.
and they don't pay attention to our responsibilities here on earth. And I've always thought that that was very dangerous, to have a permanently kind of uplifted gaze and never looking to your fellow person. I feel that in here as well. Like you're just longing for heaven. You can't really interact with the temporal world here.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I also really like that it's heaven and home,
Yeah.
because there's definitely always a human longing for, if not, the physical place that we may call home, our hometown, the house we were raised in, those sorts of things, then longing for something in our past, those
Yes.
easier times, quote unquote. And not
Yes.
easier times in some like nostalgic and never really existed sort of way, but in a way of like, as people talk, and myself included, about having to be a functioning adult, waking up and just being like, do I really, why can't I be back in those days where I took for granted, being a kid and not having to worry
Yeah.
about mortgages and paying off my credit
Yes.
card and taking care of my home and working a job and all those things that we take for granted when we're 10 or even 15, 16. um
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, I will say, for me, I spent the weekend with my parents, and there when I got up on the day that I left, a little bit of me was like, can I just stay here? This is easy. I have someone who can cook for me. I can do a few things
Mm-hmm.
around the house. I don't really have to worry about anything. Do I really have to go back to like real life and be a functioning adult again?
Yeah,
So I definitely
absolutely.
hear that longing for home, but also for heaven, for that reward that we talk about so much in Christianity,
Yes.
or that place with God, after we've lived our lives.
Yes. The next line, when Jesus is my portion, and there is a question mark there. So this is kind of like the end of the questioning process. Now, I understand this line because I grew up on the King James version of the Bible, and I think that there just that reference to portion is I intrinsically understand that. For a 21st century audience, I wonder, what we could say here, just to really make sure that folks are getting the message of what is meant when Jesus is my portion.
Sure. Can you
Which
say more
is,
about that?
I take it as, yeah, I was going to say it's like he is my bread. He is, just like he says, I am the bread of life. And it's the idea that I can't live on bread alone. I need Jesus in my life. And if I have Jesus in my life, I will be satisfied in the ways that really matter.
Yeah.
Not that physical hunger satisfaction, but that spiritual satisfaction. Jesus can satisfy that.
Totally.
My constant friend is he. Love this line. Love the reference to Jesus as a friend. I think it is particularly meaningful for folks who are in those preteen, teen years. The idea of Jesus being a friend.
And you know what I'm going to say, but I don't like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we are referring to Jesus here, but I would want us to be a little bit more careful about he, even though
Oh, yes.
I really have
Yes.
no problem with referring to Jesus as he, but still, particularly as we get down to further lines,
Mm-hmm.
I would want to caution a little bit about gendered pronouns, but no, I totally agree with you. And my point about gender pronouns is really, kind of a tertiary concern. It's not even something I would want to change necessarily. But no, I really
Okay.
like that line as well.
His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. This line actually inspired me to become a bird watcher, at least in part. So
Okay.
two things here. I really like to just break things down and really get to the root of them. And when I am in, difficult spiritual moments or, life moments, that's what I try to do. I try to get to the root of something. And I was thinking about this song of his eye is on the sparrow and I know he watches me. And I'm like, wait, I don't know if I've ever watched a sparrow. Like if God's watching sparrows, maybe I should be watching sparrows and paying attention to them. And so I started paying attention to birds generally. This is also when my boss and really good friend is also a bird watcher. And she was having some influence at the time as well. I will admit that. But really, it just piqued my curiosity of being interested in God's creation, because apparently God is very interested in God's creation.
Interesting. An interesting place to pick up an interest in bird watching.
It probably is, but I mean, I even thought about this morning. I mean, I was prepping for this podcast, but literally I was outside. It's very cold. And I could hear birds singing. And I love that. I love being outside, completely doing something else. And all of a sudden, the sound of bird song, my brain catches it and I can focus on that for a moment. It's become a very comforting thing to me, in particularly to hear bird song in the middle of winter, in the middle of, just being blanketed in a never ending sheet of white right now, since none of our snow will melt.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. But what do you think of the language here? His eye is on the sparrow. I know we're using gendered language, his there.
So based on the verses you quoted before we got into the lyrics, particularly the
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 10,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I take this less as God's eye, Jesus' eye being on a sparrow as a bird necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
more as a thing of little value. So,
Mm-hmm.
if he's watching sparrows, which, 2 sparrows are sold for a farthing, I'm pretty sure a farthing's
Mm-hmm.
not much money.
Not at all.
So if you're getting 2 sparrows for a very low cost, then this is saying that God is watching, or Jesus is watching, even these very lowly, not worthless, but these very low creatures in the grand scheme of things. So if
Right.
he's watching the sparrow, then he must be watching humans as well.
Yes. Now, one thing I'm going to say, and I know this comes from Matthew 10, and Jesus says that literally he references the Father. And so I absolutely understand the use of his there. And I find this to be, I find the idea of watching even the tiniest thing and numbering the hairs on one's head to be very much motherly acts. So
Totally.
just noting that, because who's literally looking at the hairs on my head? That was always my mom. It's typically a mom thing. The one that they shall not fall on the ground without your father. You think about the parent that cares, right, and is caring that you fell on the ground. It really reads to me as motherly acts, but Jesus characterized it as father there.
Yep.
So then we get to the chorus. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. Love those two lines. I will admit that they are incredibly fun to sing, because the word happy is that's a very fun word to sing, especially the way it is in this song. And saying I sing because I'm free. That is also just something that it feels good to say those words and to sing those words.
Yep. I will say, and this is totally me speaking as a white person who still has not fully processed his white guilt. Anytime the white poets, hymn writers, etc., use free in a hymn, I get a little uncomfortable, because it's like, what the hell are you free from? Now, given this is interesting for me because you mentioned in the introduction of the hymn that this was written by a woman. You asked the question if that changes anything. So, this is, say, for example, had Charles Gabriel, who wrote the music, had he written the lyrics, I would have a very certain reaction to a white dude saying, I'm free. It's like, okay, what are you free from?
Yes.
Okay, maybe you're free from sin, free from death, free from, we can apply that biblical lens. But I always get, when white, particularly white cis male writers throw in I'm free in something that's religious, I always go like, what are you really free from? Given that this is written by a woman, I have less of a concern about that, because it's coming from someone who definitely, when this hymn was written, is a clear marginalized identity. And would still be considered a marginalized identity in 2026, but even more so in 1905.
Absolutely. And I think, I just don't have those. I don't have, and I don't want to call it baggage, but I don't have that holding me back from fully enjoying that line and living into it. Yeah. Because it actually has more significance to me as a Black person, and being able to sing I'm free. Yeah.
Totally.
So when we get down to verse 2, it starts off, let not your heart be troubled. And that is in quotation marks, because the second line is his tender word I hear. So again, I think talking about Jesus probably here, maybe God the Father, not really sure. And let not your heart be troubled is, you believe in God, you believe also in me. In my Father's house, there are many mansions. Okay. I can't tell you a reference, but I can quote it.
It sounds right.
Okay. And the idea, I think, of hearing that, though, not just reading it, but the idea of actually hearing those words, I think, is a very comforting way of presenting that.
Sure.
And reminding us that we should try to hear those words and not just experience them as words on paper.
Well, it's also interesting from a kind of structural perspective. Verse 1 is a reflection. It is very much the author, in this case, Civilla Martin, reflecting. Verse 2 then is almost resolving the reflection, of resolving the anxiety and the trouble and possibly depression, the shadows in the first verse. And I think we see in the third verse then that it's almost because of what she's reflected on in the second verse, this is how she now lives in the third verse.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. And resting on his goodness, I lose my doubt and fear. I like the use of the word resting here, and goodness. I think we forget that about God, that God is good and has goodness. But resting is such a comforting way of thinking about that, especially for one who is anxious or suffers from diagnosed anxiety. That idea of never being able to rest or unclench your shoulders. Whew.
Yep.
Those who know.
Sure.
And then I lose my doubt and fear. I love the idea of losing it, because in my mind, in my very literal mind, it's like, ooh, that just slipped out of my hand. Like I put it down for a second and now I can't even find it. Like the inability to even find the doubt and the fear, I think, is the part that's really encouraging there.
Yep.
Though by the path he leadeth, but one step I may see. And so the wording here is very 1905 and poetic, but the message is a very important one. I'm being led down a path, even though I only see the one step in front of me. Right. And so it's the idea is that there is a path here, even though I only see one step. And then when you marry that to his eye is on the sparrow and I know he watches me, it gives you confidence to keep going down that path, even when you only see one step.
Yep.
And then finally, the third verse. And like you said, really kind of, we started off with some self-reflection. We've looked at the Bible to see what God was saying to us. And now here we have how we are moving in the world because of that. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise. I think the wording here is important because it says that you are going to be tempted. Like it just expects the temptation. It expects the clouds.
Yep. And again, it almost goes back to, sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
It almost goes back to that first verse, why should the shadows come? And here it is, whenever clouds arise. Okay, she's no longer asking why this happens, but saying it's going to happen, but whenever it happens, and now the rest of those verse.
Right, which is something I think we have to remind ourselves of. Like, we can be comforted. We can, have these wonderful spiritual experiences. That doesn't preclude life from continuing to occur. When songs give place to sighing. I love that line. I think it's so poetic when, you don't have a song in your heart in anymore, and all you can do is just sigh. You just got a big old, And then when hope within me dies, that's a sad one, but a real one. It happens.
Totally.
It happens more than once, unfortunately. It can happen once a day sometimes. But here we go. This is what's happening when all these things happen, as they are going to happen. I draw the closer to him. From care, he sets me free. Again, it's reminiscent of that resting in his goodness. I draw the closer to him. Reminds one of an embrace that you are having. And then from care, he sets me free. I think this is I think this might be the answer to I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. We're free from these cares. So I think that's actually very neat that she answers that question. And it really isn't just a free out there. It is literally from these cares. And then again, his eye is on the sparrow and I know he watches me.
Yeah, I think I like this verse the most.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we should start.
But it also gives a nice resolution to the earlier verses.
Yes.
Particularly to the first verse.
Yes.
But I think looking at this, many hymns, including the hymns we've looked at, have been largely, some of them, like Amazing Grace, sets up the rest of the song in the first verse. but then
Mm-hmm.
it's just him writing. This one to
Yes.
me tells much more of a story. Again, structurally, we're asking questions in the first, we're starting to answer them in the second, and in the third, we're sort of going back to what we've learned in verse 1 and 2, and for lack of a better word, applying it to our
Yes.
lives, which is a really nice narrative without, kind of coming out right and saying, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's a great narrative for the Christian walk. Like this is what it looks like and feels like, but it doesn't feel patriarchal. It doesn't feel damning in any way or scary in any way. It is hopeful, it is encouraging, but also says something. I think it says something real. And we've talked about that, about hymns and gospel songs and all these different things. And the one of the criticisms of gospel music is often that it's just platitudes, or it's not saying
Yep.
anything very doctrinal or theological. I think this might be one of the gospel songs that actually does have a clear theological message, and I think a positive theological message on top of that.
Definitely, definitely.
Ooh, it only took us all season, Ben.
hey, we've looked at, including this one, 9 songs, hymns, etc.
True.
There are plenty out there that, while there are many that are platitudes upon platitudes upon platitudes, while there are many that have been taken from their original meaning, like Onward Christian Soldiers, and applied to many things that the hymn writer might have been more than a little appalled by, there are some really good, very theologically sound, even from the more progressive theology that I think you and I both espouse. There are some really good theologically sound hymns from all generations out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And this one just happens to be incredibly popular, or popularized. And I'm glad it was. I'm glad it was repopularized, because it's a good one.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Ben, it is time for our final verdict on His Eyes on the Sparrow. Does this one need a chord change? Just some minor adjustments here and there. Should it get a remix? Meaning we need to change like a whole verse, or maybe the refrain. Or is this a record scratch? Meaning, ooh, we might need to take this out the repertoire.
I actually don't think we have a good verdict for this one. I mean, yeah, okay. I have this concern about, gendered language, but setting that aside, because I do think that the first verse is addressed to Jesus. We've kind of demonstrated that the 3 verses play into each other. So I'm okay with the he him language here, because I think, again, we're referring to Jesus, who at least on earth appeared as a man. So I don't think that's necessarily something we need to change. So honestly, I don't think I would really not make any changes to this.
Awesome.
A little part of me wants to add another verse or so, to maybe bring it from 1905 into 2026 a little bit more. But at the same time, I hesitate with that, because it's really hard to add verses to hymns, particularly this long after the fact, without it being glaring that you've done so. It's sort of like, you have a brick house and you try to add new brick to it, and it's very clear where the new brick, or the old brick ends and the new brick starts.
Yes.
There's a lot of songs that people have tried to add another verse to, and it's kind of like, clearly that verse is from later, or that verse wasn't really part of the original scheme. So as much as I would love to add a little bit to this, or have someone add to this, honestly, I think it's fine as is. I don't see any point or any need in changing it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. If there was anything, I think it's the language, just understanding that, Jesus is my portion of it. And then the line, it was though by the path he leadeth, but one step I may see. just making sure that that language is understood because it's such good language, right? It's telling such a good story. Those are, I think, the only changes that I would make to it. And so a very, very minor chord change. But I think I agree with you. It is a great song as is, and it's really nice to have one that we agree is doing the Lord's work
Yeah.
as it's supposed to.
Exactly.
All right. Ben, that brings us to the end of this mini season. This was
Yes, it does.
amazing. Thank you for indulging my curiosity about music that we use in the church.
Totally. It's been a fun take on some of our better hymns. I've definitely learned a lot from this. You've even introduced me to a few hymns that I didn't before really know all that well.
Yeah, same, absolutely same. And I hope that our listeners really got something out of it, particularly those who are in music ministry in your churches. And even if none of these hymns related to you or your congregation, just the idea of thinking through the music that we sing and worship with in our churches or even in our private time. This doesn't just have to be a thing that's congregational. This is about the music that we listen to on our own as well, and making sure that it really aligns with your theology, that it affirms your identities, that it reflects the God that you are intending to worship and serve.
Yep.
All right.
Well,
thanks for listening, everybody.
And also, I'd encourage our listeners to tune in next Sunday when the first episode of season 3 of Coming Out Christian airs. It is Easter Sunday next week. We're so happy to present another season of great episodes with LGBTQIA plus people of faith and allies.
It's going to be a good one, y'all. We've already started recording. Amazing stories. You really won't want to miss it. Wonderful guests from just about everywhere, every walk of life. So definitely something in there for everybody. So check it out right here. Same feed, same link. You don't have to look for it. And it's right next week. You don't have to miss out on anything.
Thank you for joining us on How Sweet a Sound, produced by Love Boldly and the Coming Out Christian podcast. If you enjoyed this content, consider donating to Love Boldly today. You can donate at www.loveboldly.org/donate. That's www.loveboldly.org/donate. Also, like and follow us on Instagram, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.